Tap by Koski, picked up in the corner by Thursday. He works to the rear. Walker, head fakes his man, goes into the key, spins around for a 15-footer, cutter.
Friars with the ball in play, goes to Ernie, plenty of room, takes a 15-footer, and hits.
The return pass fires up to Williams, coming in from the right, stops at the foul line. Behind him, the Hassett puts up a 25-footer, that's good.
Spur with 9, Donovan with the ball with 6, with 5, right side, Pop Lewis.
Take by Arizona, put the ball in Bibby's hands and let him finish the game. This can tie it. Yeah! Jamel Thomas.
I fucked up. I didn't take Ryan Gomes.
McDermott comes out to grab him. Henton on the left wing. Holds on to the basketball with 7 to shoot. Goes cross court. Money. Hits the shot. Money.
Be them dudes. Be them champs. Friar Town is Title Town tonight.
This is the 24/7 Scout Friars Podcast with Richard Corin and Steve.
Welcome, Friar fans, to another episode of the 24/7 Scout Friars Podcast. I am Richard Corin. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Steve Hartnett. Steve, how you doing tonight? Have a good holiday?
I did, good time with family and friends. Unfortunately, in between festivities, had some colleagues and friends who had relatives who passed away. So I've got a few wakes I had to go to. So that puts a little damper on some things. But, at this time of year, I think that's common, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It's tough to lose people at this time of the year, and definitely could put a damper on the holidays.
Yeah, I mean, it was no one in my personal family, but I feel for the others that had to deal with it. So, it's just part of life, I guess. But otherwise, good holiday season, for myself and my family. Thanks for asking.
All right, we are joined tonight also by Kevin Connelly of Storm the Paint. Kevin, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
We wanted to have Kevin on tonight because Providence's next game is going to be against the St. John's Red Storm. Kevin is one of the folks who covers the Johnnies. That game will be on January 3rd at Madison Square Garden. I believe it's a noontime game on the 3rd. Friars will have been off for a little over 2 weeks. They last played on December 19th, losing to Seton Hall 62-57. St. John's right now is 8-4. They've got one more game to play on New Year's Eve against Georgetown before they face the Friars. They are 1-0 in the Big East. They defeated DePaul. St. John's been a really interesting team this year, Kevin, because, if there's been two disappointing teams in the Big East, you might say that it was Providence and St. John's. To start, St. John's was picked number 1, I believe, in the preseason Big East coaches poll. They started the season number 6 in the AP poll. They are now out of the poll. They're 1-4 against, high majors, quad 1 wins. They're 1-4. It's been a little disappointing so far. Give us your sort of overview on what's kind of gone on in Queens.
There's a couple of things, and the expectation was so high coming into the season, but let's go back to the summer first, and the big question was they never added a true point guard. Right. And it was this idea that Ian Jackson was going to be the point guard. And, I think that's one of the few missteps Rick Pitino has had as the head coach of St. John's in his short tenure now, was that whenever it was April or May, when he posted on Twitter that Ian Jackson was going to be the new great point guard of St. John's. I think that just put way too much pressure and way too much attention on him for someone who was already going to have a lot of attention on him coming from North Carolina back home to New York and playing for St. John's. And it was the viral media clip that happened in July or August where Rick said that the point guard position was becoming obsolete in college basketball, or not just in college basketball, but in basketball in general, and how, it was positionless basketball and all this stuff. Now, fast forward to December 20th, and St. John's has a dreadful second half against Kentucky, a game they led by 7 at halftime. They led by 10 in the first half. They looked like they didn't even belong on the same court as Kentucky in the second half. And after the game, he says, well, we don't have a point guard like Jalen Lowe of Kentucky who can come in and control the game. And then follow-up questions were like, well, you said that you didn't need a point guard. And his answer was, well, what did you really want me to say? Did you want me to say that we don't have a point guard and get their confidence down before the season and all this stuff? So that's really been issue number one. And issue number two, honestly, has been finishing games. When you look at St. John's losses so far this season, and now they have 4 of them against Alabama, against Iowa State, against Auburn, and against Kentucky. They led in the second half in all 4 of those games. Against Alabama, they held a 1-point lead in the second half. They were down by as many as double digits. They came back, took a lead, couldn't finish. Against Iowa State, Oziyah Sellers brought them back from the dead, and they couldn't get a stop late, and they couldn't make a basket late to win that game. Against Auburn and Kentucky, kind of mirror images of each other, where St. John's, they struggle early. They have a really good final 8 to 10 minutes of the first half, and then they forget how to play basketball in the second half. So it's been a crazy season for St. John's. Now, I will say that the competition they played so far this year has been much tougher than what they played last year at this time. But I think you see a lot more warts in the play style and the roster than you did at this time last year.
So I got to ask you, how does a guy like Rick Pitino, an experienced coach, he knew last year he had a two-headed monster at point guard with Kadari Richmond, Devian Smith, and he allows himself to go into this season without picking up a point guard. They were so good last year, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that they had these 2 guys who could control a game. How could he make a mistake like that?
It was pretty glaring. And in that post-game press conference against Kentucky, he said that they missed on all 4 of the guys they went after in the transfer portal. Okay. And, a couple of us after the game were thinking like, okay, who are the 4? And we came up with 2 out of the transfer portal, definitely. Xavier Lee, who's at Florida, Silas Demery, who's at UConn. The other name we were just throwing in there was Caden Lewis, who was a freshman at Villanova. They were involved with him after he decommitted from Kentucky. We couldn't tell if that was one of the names. And then, there were other names that were floated in the rumor mill, that guys that maybe they were targeting as point guards that either they didn't get or never fully entered the transfer portal. He specifically said we missed on all 4 guys of the guys that they were recruiting, and it's kind of been left up to interpretation of who those exact 4 are.
You wonder, could he have used Bud Clark, who's on the Seton Hall roster?
Could have used a lot of guys, I think. Dylan Darling is the most true point guard on the team, if that phrase makes sense. But when you look at his size and his stature, like in the Big East, he'd be a really good backup point guard. He's not someone that you really want out there for 35 minutes a game.
Good.
How is St. John's? They've only lost 3 games, but
4.
4. Okay.
They're 8-4.
Yeah. To the extent they've lost these games against, good competition, are they losing them on the defensive end, or are they losing them on the offensive end? Assuming you have to pick your poison here.
I'm going to say defensively, because one big issue that they're having that they didn't have last year was defensive rebounding. And you think the player that you get back in Zuby Ejiofor, plus the additions, and we haven't mentioned him yet, and Bryce Hopkins and Dylan Mitchell, and even the return of Ruben Prey, you think it's going to be a really good rebounding team. But in these games against these really super athletic and big teams like Auburn, like Kentucky, they've been outmatched. The one thing I'll say, and I keep going back to the Kentucky game, was St. John's has athletes that can win in the Big East. Like they have athletes that can really stifle teams like Providence, like Marquette, like Butler, and they can win on their athleticism in some of those games. Kentucky is a completely different world, and St. John's doesn't have those type of athletes. I mean, just standing on the court before the game, looking at Kentucky, it's like, oh my God, those guys are huge at every position. And like they dwarfed some of St. John, like Jaden Quaintance dwarfed Zuby Ejiofor.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just look like an NBA lineup.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing happened to St. John's last year in the NCAA tournament against Arkansas. I was at those, I worked those games. I saw Arkansas on Thursday, and I turned around and I said to some of the St. John's fans who were sitting right behind me on Saturday, I said, I think St. John's going to have a problem today. You know, they don't match up well against Arkansas. Arkansas has these uber athletes, these long, lean, springy athletes that St. John's just doesn't have. And I think you sort of allude to that with their early season out of conference schedule. Now, Rick Pitino came into this year with the idea that his team was going to, I think his team was going to be really good. And he's scheduled to try to give his team multiple opportunities to build up quad one wins for the resume and a really good seed come March. And that obviously has not panned out. So what's the hope now? Because obviously you don't have as many of those opportunities come Big East Conference play.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think when you look at what St. John's did in the non-conference and the missed opportunities that they had. Now, granted, I think Baylor's going to be a pretty decent team. I think Baylor will be safely in the field. Ole Miss has been a disaster. So St. John's was hoping Ole Miss was going to be what they were last year in a Sweet 16 team, and I think Ole Miss is going to be a team that doesn't make the NCAA tournament. So, I mean, I think right now the best case scenario for St. John's is that they get a 4 or a 5. Realistically, I think you're looking anything from the 6 to 10 range. And I know that's a wide range of what I just said, but like if they were ever to go 18-2 in the Big East, I think they could probably be on the 4 range. If they go 16-4, I think it could likely be a 7.
If I'm a St. John's fan, I'm hoping that instead of there being a huge drop off from UConn and St. John's, that a few teams really separate themselves from the rest and improve their metrics and record such that a St. John's win over the 3rd, 4th, 5th place teams can really boost them a little bit, or at least keep them, above the mark where they want to be versus the field, so to speak.
I think the 3 teams you're looking at there are Creighton, Villanova, and Butler. Now, I left one team out, and Seton Hall. I am not the biggest believer in Seton Hall. And I think that came to fruition a little bit when they played Villanova right before Christmas. But I think Creighton, who had a disastrous non-conference, they still have talent, and you're starting to see that now in Big East play. Villanova, I think, has talent and has the ability to knock off some of these teams in the Big East, and I think Butler's the wild card. I think, and I'll throw Seton Hall in there as well. I think Butler and Seton Hall, if they can muster up really good seasons that have NCAA tournament resumes, or at least of such being on the bubble, I think that'll make things a little bit easier for St. John's, because right now there's going to be an inordinate amount of pressure on them in the 2 games against Connecticut to try to win one of those and get that top 10, top 5 victory that they were hoping to get in non-conference play.
Yeah, St. John's has got to be hoping for more opportunities. They can't just look at those 2 games against UConn.
Yeah.
I personally think Seton Hall is a little bit better than Butler. But Butler can score. They don't play particularly good defense. Providence really should have beaten them at Butler. I mean, they lost in double overtime, but they had many chances to win. They should have won that game. And frankly, Providence should have won the game against Seton Hall. But at times, especially in the first half, Seton Hall's suffocating defense was impacting Providence. And Providence has, if nothing else, Providence has a lot of guys who can create their own shot and put it in the hoop, like really against anybody. They don't play a lick of D, but they can score.
Yeah, I mean, defense travels, and Seton Hall plays defense. I would not undersell them.
Yes, Seton Hall is going to win games this year because they play great defense. But kind of you look at that game against Villanova, eventually you got to put the ball in the basket. And they've done a really good job at that so far.
Yep.
I think a lot of the warts came out against even Providence, although they won the game where they didn't. I think they scored 62 points.
72.
So, okay, and then against Villanova, where they were held with a low scoring total as well. So, I mean, Seton Hall, they have the formula, they have the recipe. Is it going to be there every single night? I think is the question.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched St. John's a few times, and the one thing, especially that second half against Kentucky, their offense really struggled to score. I feel like a team that plays really elite level defense can make it very difficult for St. John's to score. They've struggled shooting the ball at times.
Mm-hmm. The biggest X factor for St. John's is Oziyah Sellers. When Oziyah Sellers is hitting three-pointers, the offense looks completely different.
Yep.
Now, it's tough because he's not a player that can create his own shot. Like Ian Jackson can create his own shot. Joson Sanon at times can create his own shot. Oziyah Sellers is one of the best shooters in the country, but plays have to be run for him. They can't just give him the ball and say, go make it happen and get free for a three. They have to, in transition, where he's trailing the play or he's ahead of the play, or it has to be a design play for him. He's not somebody where in a half-court set, you put the ball in his hands and he can create his own opportunities.
All right, let's talk about old friend Bryce Hopkins. His performance this year has really been kind of up and down. Mm-hmm. I was surprised to see that he's currently leading the team in scoring. I thought that it was going to be Zuby. He's at 13.9, but he's only averaging about 4.3 rebounds a game. Rick has expressed frustration at times openly in press with Bryce. Too soft, not rebounding well enough. He's taken him at times out of the starting lineup. What's going on, in your eyes from what you've seen with Bryce so far this year?
I've noticed he's a little hesitant offensively. Teams know that he can be explosive getting to the basket, and they're giving him open threes. And he's bypassing some of them. And he's a decent three-point shooter. The big thing recently, Rick has said, is that he wants him to change his personality on the court. He wants him to get meaner. He wants him to get nastier. Rebounding has been one of the biggest issues with him. And the big thing is, and Rick has said this about Bryce, but the entire front court as well, like they have to hit somebody. Like they have to box out. They can't just be reliant on their athleticism to get these rebounds, which has led to some of the struggles that I talked about a few minutes ago. So, I mean, he had a great game, or he had a good game against Harvard right before the holiday break. St. John's didn't bring him in to have good games against Harvard. You look at his stat line against Kentucky, and it's like, oh, he didn't have that bad of a game. But if you watch the game, he was not good, and most of those points came in garbage time at the end. Now,
he's a totally different player, rebounding the ball from what I've seen of him at Providence.
He averaged 8.5 rebounds.
Yeah.
In 2 years at Providence.
It's interesting you say that too, because at least from my perspective, it was more of a pertinent question and conversation with him in the summer and early in the off season, or the preseason and early in the regular season. Like, hey, how's your health? How's your knee? How are you doing? Do you feel confident in it? And all that stuff. And the answer was always, yeah, feel good. And after the game against Harvard last week, Rick Pitino, who really hadn't mentioned Bryce's health at all, brought up the fact that like, oh, when you have an injury like that and you're on the sideline for just about 2 years, and even though you're practicing a little bit, like it's still tough to get your legs underneath you. And I thought it was interesting that that was brought up then. But like he had two awesome games against Iowa State and Baylor. And ever since that Baylor game, he's had a couple of good moments against Iona. He didn't play that poorly against Ole Miss, but that's kind of similar to what I was saying about Harvard. You didn't bring him in to have great games against Ole Miss and Iona and Harvard. You brought him in to have great games against Alabama and Iowa State and Baylor and Auburn and Kentucky.
Well, with Providence, against these, as we're talking, uber athletic teams, Bryce would struggle.
Mm-hmm.
He would have his best games against either lower level competition or teams that matched up well athletically with him. The really athletic teams are the games where his production went way down, even at Providence. So this isn't something completely new. What's different is him not being as assertive on the backboards, whether it's against a good team or a bad team.
Yeah, and I think I don't know why that is. I don't want to blame it on the knee and the injuries, because that necessarily wasn't a solution or an answer for that question for most of the season. I mean, Dylan Mitchell is an incredible athlete, and he hasn't particularly rebounded well consistently. So I think it's one of the major questions St. John still has to answer. And if they want to have a really, really good Big East season, I think you're going to need to see a Bryce Hopkins that was a first team all Big East selection in his first year with Providence.
Mm-hmm. And talk a little bit about Zuby. Obviously, he came back. He's averaging right now 13.8 and 7.2 rebounds. Is this a Zuby season, like what we saw last year? Has there been any drop off there, or are you getting about what you expected from him?
No, I think you're getting what you expected from him. I think you're getting better rim protection, which is crazy to say because he's only about 6'9". There was a stretch of 3 games in a row where I think he accumulated over 20 total blocks, which was really, really impressive. The one thing is like, why aren't they rebounding defensively as well as they have? But I mean, Zuby's the same guy. He has the incredible motor. He's still very good on the offensive glass. The outside shot hasn't been there like it was at the end of last season, but you're not expecting him to make a lot of threes. It's just to keep the defense honest. If he's open from the free throw line and above, he has the ability to take the shot. But no, I think Zuby, for the most part, is what you would expect coming into the year.
Last year I felt like St. John's really achieved what they did because they were so well connected defensively. They could switch. Zuby could guard 1 through 5. It didn't matter. This year, I mean, right now, St. John's is 18th in defensive efficiency, but it doesn't feel from watching them that they're that good. That it doesn't feel that they're that connected and that they're that difficult to score against the way they were last year. So I don't know.
Gives?
I was going to say, guys, I hate to do this to you. I don't have a good answer for you because your thoughts are exactly my thoughts. When you look at KenPom and they're a top 20 defense, and it's like, how? I watched their defense last year, and that was top 10, top 5, whatever it ended up being. And I watched their defense this year, and it's almost like teams can score at will against them. Alabama did. Now, Alabama has great guards, and that was early in the season. But yeah, I mean, Kentucky scored at will in the second half. It's like, how is this defense rated so highly by some of the metric sites? Because my 2 eyes are telling me that it's not that great of a defense.
Yeah. I mean, they are holding opponents. Opponents are only shooting 29% from 3, which is a big part of the game. But aside from that, it seems like teams are scoring against them without anywhere near the difficulty that they had last year.
Well,
No,
DePaul, you won comfortably against them, right? But their two biggest scorers were their bigs,
yeah.
the 6'8" guys.
The one thing I'll say is like Kadari Richmond and Davon Smith knew how to play defense last year. Ian Jackson and Joson Sanon don't know how to play defense and didn't know how to play defense. And I think in part that's due to because these guys are still young. They're only sophomores. And I mean, not to rag on other coaches around the country, but I also think you have to take a look at where they came from and kind of the conversation around those coaches and Joson Sanon at Arizona State and then Ian Jackson at North Carolina for all their struggles last year. And you've seen players from that North Carolina team last year also transfer and have incredible seasons. A guy like Elliot Cadeau, who is at Michigan. So I think that has a little bit to do with it as well.
Getting away from the maybe less than great coaching.
Yes. Yes. Not being with your first year of college basketball, not being with a Rick Pitino or somebody like that, or Tom Izzo, or something like that.
Yeah. It's funny too, because we have fans on our message board who talk about the fact that they feel like the point guard position is going away, and they watch the NBA and you don't really need a point guard in the NBA. Everyone's 6'8" and can handle the ball like a point guard and create their own space. And the NBA, let's face it, is all about throwing up as many threes as you can and occasionally driving to the basket for either a layup or a foul.
Yep.
Right? But college is different. I feel as though you need that coach on the floor that kind of translates what the coach on the sidelines wants, more so than the pros. And I think Providence is suffering from a lack of a true point guard, and St. John's is suffering from that same thing.
And the thing I'll add is that, like, last year, Kadari Richmond was a man. Like,
Yep.
it wasn't that you had a freshman, sophomore, or whomever running point guard. You had a grown man who wasn't afraid or intimidated of anything as your coach out there on the court. And the same thing with Davon Smith, who was never intimidated by anything or anyone. But Kadari Richmond was just this physical, imposing presence when he was out there. And Ian Jackson, for as talented as he is, he's no Kadari Richmond.
Yeah, even when Richmond played for Seton Hall, you couldn't keep him out of the lane.
Mm-hmm.
He just had the handle and he had the size and length at point guard where he was a really tough guard, and you miss that when maybe you take it for granted when you have it, and then you really miss it when it's gone.
I think St. John's fans are experiencing that this year. And not to sound like too much of a homer, but like if you substitute player X in the backcourt off this team and input a Kadari Richmond or Davon Smith, I think they have the talent to be that top 10 team-ish if you were to have the ability to make that change or substitution.
Yeah, they win some of those close games against top teams that they lost.
When guards were dominating them.
Right.
When Alabama's guards were dominating them. When Tahad Pettiford from Auburn was dominating them. When Jalen Lowe just orchestrated everything in that second half for Kentucky. And even Iowa State, when you look at Jefferson or Lipsy, like those games could easily have gone the other way, at least a couple of them.
Yeah, Lowe was fantastic.
Yeah. A guy where you thought they were going to have to do surgery on the court on his shoulder after he was in for 7 seconds. He gets bumped. It happened right in front of me. You could see the look on his face, holding his shoulder, and just goes right to the locker room and is not seen again until second half warmups. And all of a sudden he's back in the game and Kentucky's off and running.
Yep, dominated the game. Talk a little bit about so there's a Providence kid on the St. John's roster, a freshman, Kelvin Odih, who played at LaSalle Academy in Providence, and then he went on to South Kent, and he went on to Southern California Academy. He's played a little bit. I know he got a few minutes against Harvard. How has he looked so far?
It's funny because when I was out there over the summer watching them practice. I was like, who's this kid that's taking all the shots and is controlling the ball? And it was Kelvin Odih. And at the end of the practice, suffered an ankle sprain, and it kind of lingered until the start of the preseason. But I mean, it's a kid that's tough as nails, kind of built like a NFL linebacker. But you can see that he's still a freshman, and Rick Pitino doesn't like to play freshmen. He's an incredibly tenacious rebounder, and given that that was an issue for St. John's, specifically in their backcourt, I'm surprised he didn't get time like early in the season when they were going through some of those troubles. But don't expect him to play any real meaningful minutes this year.
Yeah, yeah. A couple other things. Joson Sanon, a kid from the area here in New England as well. Providence was very involved with him, ended up going out to Arizona State. It was a big disappointment for a few Friar fans who had really followed him. What have you seen from him so far? Does he look like a future star? Does, what parts of his game still need to really be developed?
Oh man. So I will say I've seen him get incredible. I've seen a lot of improvement from him from day one until now. Day one, he was, I'm going to shoot, I'm going to score, and I'm not going to do much else.
Yep.
I'm not going to play defense. I'm not going to rebound. You've seen now the attention to detail defensively. I noticed right away when Rick Pitino had gotten on him that you have to rebound. You see him lurking around the defensive basket when a shot goes up instead of just sprinting down the other end of the floor. So you're seeing the improvement from him. A gifted offensive player. The thing that I think he needs, I think he just needs to need more time physically to mature and develop. I mean, he's someone once kind of he grows and gets more comfortable in his body. He has a lot of tools to be successful. I think he can be an NBA player one day because he has some of the skill set. Now, this is a guy who did put his name into the NBA draft after committing to St. John's and went through some of the process. I know he wants to go to the NBA as fast as possible. I don't see it right now, but that's not to say in the next 3 or 4 months he can't change my mind and show me things that prove that he could do it in a year. But I think, at least as of right now, he probably needs another year or two in college.
Yeah, he's not quite AJ Dibanza.
No.
He needs a little more time.
All right. Kevin Connelly from Storm the Paint, thank you very much for taking the time to join us tonight. You'll be, I assume, at the Garden on Saturday, January 3rd.
I will.
Do you expect a big crowd?
That's another really good question, because I think with the non-conference struggles, the steam has kind of come out of the train a little bit with this hype of 11 or 12 Garden games and top 5 team and Big East champs. But I think some of the struggles have taken a little wind out of the sails of St. John's fans. But Saturday afternoon, a lot of these tickets have been sold. I'm sure there's going to be a healthy amount of Providence fans that make the trip down. So I do expect a big crowd. I'm interested to see, given what I've read on social media about the feelings of Providence fans towards how things have gone for them, how many of them do make the trip and how many of them make their voices heard towards a certain St. John's player. So I think that's one thing I'm interested to see how it turns out on Saturday. But I'll be with two ex-Friars that are still in the still get a lot of wrath of the Providence fans on New Year's Eve, and Ed Cooley and Bryce Hopkins.
I personally expect Hopkins to have a good game.
I'm sure he will.
I think he's gonna play hard. And Providence really doesn't have is probably their weakest position is probably the power forward spot. So I expect him to have a good game, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I kind of wish it was at Providence. Because they're playing Ed Cooley Wednesday, and then if they were to play at Providence, I think that would give at least a reporter some more storylines and quotes to work with, but just have to wait until Valentine's Day, where I'm sure Bryce will be getting a lot of love from Providence fans.
Oh, he'll be getting lots of cards and kisses and things like that. No doubt.
Bouquets.
Bouquets thrown at his feet. No doubt at the amp. Our fans are famous for that sort of reception.
Right.
Hey,
Rhode Islanders don't hold grudges, Kevin.
No, not at all.
Listen, I always say it. My favorite, if you want to call it a road trip or a train trip, my favorite spot in the Big East to always go is Providence. I love.
Are you coming this year?
I am.
All right. Look me up. We gotta connect when you come in.
I will. It was a bonus last year, getting to go up there twice, and then obviously for the NCAA tournament being up there for 5 days. So
always a good time.
I'm excited. I'm excited to get back up there in February.
All right, Kevin. I'll see you in February. Thanks for joining us again.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks. All right, Steve. We're going to pause right now and welcome our new sponsor, Liberty Lumber. Let's hear what they have to say, because you dream it, they'll build it.
Yeah, and we appreciate all our subscribers purchasing Liberty Lumber's products. They make a wonderful Providence stuff, and they have the perfect build outs for your man cave to watch Providence basketball. So check them out and support our sponsor. Thanks.
What's up, Friar fans? I got some big news. My name's Justin. This is Liberty Lumber Products. Let me show you what's going on. We make handmade products right here in Rhode Island, and we're officially licensed with Providence College. So my team and I have been working extremely hard on some coaster bundles for the holidays, so check these things out. We have over 25 coasters that are available. They're going to be available on our website right now, and don't waste any time. It's the holidays. We make these things with our hands, so they're going to take a little bit of time.
All right, Friar fans, we are back. Steve, let's close by sort of talking about, Providence right now, 7-6, 0-2 in the Big East. Obviously, they'll have been off for little over 2 weeks. They'll be taking on St. John's. Based on what you heard from Kevin, your thoughts on what Providence needs to do to go in and get what would be kind of a wow win that they really need on January 3rd.
I'm really hoping this is a game where Oswin sort of meets the challenge of going up against Zuby and, really shows himself. We were concerned a little bit about his foot, but hopefully with some rest, he'll be okay and ready to go. Fingers crossed. But if he is healthy, this is an opportunity for him to shine. Kim English knows that the Providence fans are going to be on Bryce Hopkins, and it's going to be incumbent on Duncan Powell and to a lesser degree Ryan Mila and Jameer Jones to do their best to limit Hopkins from just embarrassing them and going nuts on them. That's going to be a key focus. They don't have the same level of guards that they had last year, so they can give a little more attention to the front court players.
Yeah, I mean, Hopkins having a big game, like we mentioned before, against Providence really would be kind of a worst case scenario. It's the one thing we don't want to see. And the one thing we do want to see, obviously, is a Friar win.
It's worst case scenario, but it's not least likely scenario.
Right.
It's something that's completely plausible that Providence fans should be prepared for, because, again, as I mentioned to Kevin, Providence does not have what I consider a legit power forward or a long power forward who can give Hopkins fits like Kentucky and Alabama had.
And let's face it, this team needs a win badly. I mean, there's winning and there's learning to win, and this team needs to get over the hump and learn how to win, especially if it ends up being, and it'll be a relatively competitive, close game. I mean, Providence scores enough to keep it close. And St. John's doesn't defend the way they did last year.
No, but they're good from three, defending the three, and Providence shoots a lot of threes.
They are good from defending the three, no doubt. It'll be incumbent on Providence to take advantage of that if they're overplaying the perimeter and try to get to the basket. I don't see Zuby as an elite rim protector.
He's just not long enough and doesn't have the leaping ability.
Yeah, and
he takes up space. I don't think the rebounding woes that St. John's has had, I don't think they're going to have that problem against Providence.
Yeah, I mean, Zuby is maybe 6'9", probably 6'8",
yeah.
And he's their big man. And that came back to bite them against Arkansas last year and some of the athletic teams like Kentucky this year that are bigger and more athletic. So Providence should be able to take advantage of that and get inside. But, again, it's going to be really interesting to see how the Friars come out of this 2-week layoff.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about the offensive rebounding of St. John's. Zuby's an elite offensive rebounder. Providence has had trouble boxing out, getting loose balls, and getting the 50-50 balls is often the difference between winning and losing. So if they get out rebounded by a significant margin, it's going to be awfully tough to win the game.
Even last year, Steve, if you remember, both of the games, both home and away, Providence gave St. John's all they could handle and came as close to beating St. John's, aside from the few losses they did have, as anybody in the Big East.
Well, they had a 20-plus lead at halftime on St. John's at the AMP, prompting Rick Pitino's famous rant about what's the matter with you people and blah, 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 challenging their manhood and so forth. But they came back and won that game on that, again, offensive rebound and putback by Zuby Ejiofor.
Yeah, I mean, both games really came down to final play calls, and both of them were sort of bad matchups out of a switch on defense. I think Bensley Joseph was on Zuby, which enabled Zuby to get to the board with ease, and pick and roll in the second one that created a basket at the end.
Yeah, pick and roll defense, as we talked about in the past, major point of emphasis for improvement for Providence.
Yep. All right, Steve, we'll let you go. I think we'll talk again after the St. John's game, and it doesn't get any easier from there. After St. John's, we've got UConn coming to the AMP, and in a game where the students aren't going to be there, and as a result, there's likely to be a number of UConn fans. That's life in the Big East.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the students aren't there for the UConn game. Coach Hurley deserves so much better. But yeah, the St. John's game, I'm hoping that Providence had some time away to clear their heads, recharge their batteries, renew their focus, and hopefully, continue to make incremental improvements on their deficiencies. I mean, I thought they played half decent against St. Seton Hall. I mean, they were right there. They just didn't get the key stops at the end, but for other stretches of the game, they played pretty good defense. So, I don't know. Like I said, there's still hope that they can go on a run and finish the season strong. The coaching staff needs it, and I think players need it for their
psyche.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, these 2 weeks are a time of all coaching staffs do a lot of self-assessment, a lot of self-analysis, watch a ton of film. This has to have been a period where they correct some of the things as best they can that they've not been doing well in practice towards correcting those things in these 2 weeks. Hopefully we see some different things come January 3rd.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
All right, Steve, you have a great New Year's. If I don't talk to you, stay safe, and we will speak again after the New Year.
All right. Happy New Year for our town.
Happy New Year, Friar Town. And as always, go Friars.